So as some of you may know, a clip I posted from my interview this week with Justice DY Chandrachud went crazy viral. For those who missed it, we'll play it again shortly in this video, but basically it was an exchange where I'm asking the former Chief Justice of India on the rationale behind the Ayodhya verdict. And his response was so startling, shall we say, that it ended up breaking the internet. Now, as a journalist, I would be dishonest to pretend that I am not pleased by the fact that an interview I did is getting a ton of traction. But frankly, going into the interview, I wasn't fully convinced that we would be able to break new ground. Justice Chandrachud is one of the most over-interviewed members of the higher judiciary. But as the folks at Newslaundry rightly pointed out to me, for all the media appearances he's done, he's not really been adequately questioned on the very consequential and controversial verdicts that he's been part of. The result of taking that probing approach was an interview that threw up a series of revelatory moments like the Ayodhya one. That exchange, in my view, wasn't an outlier. I believe it came to embody the tenor of our conversation, where in response to my cross-questioning, Justice Chandrachud first said he would only stick to what was said in the verdicts, but then ended up at times citing justifications, inflammatory justifications even, that found no mention in the judgments and were a marked departure from the facts. Let me just highlight two such telling moments, starting with the now viral clip, his response to my question on why the Ayodhya judgment went against the Muslims despite the court accepting that the Hindus were guilty of acts of desecration.
What about the fundamental act of desecration, the very erection of the mosque? We forget all that happened? We forget that happened in history? Now, once you accept that that happened in history, and we had evidence in the form of archeological evidence, how can you shut your eyes?
I thought the judgment found that there was no evidence that the underlying structure was necessarily demolished to build the mosque, because there was a gap of several centuries between the underlying structure and the mosque, and there could have been any number of reasons.
Let's face it, ultimately, people who have criticized the judgment want to ignore the fundamental history of the mosque and then look at the more comparative history and selective elements of that history in support of what they postulate.
The erection of the Babri Masjid, a fundamental act of desecration, it's not hard to see why that response blew up. As many are asking, does this not go against the central premise as claimed by the authors of the Ayodhya judgment, that their ruling was based on evidence, not majoritarianism? Not only that, as several commenters have noted, Justice Chandrachud completely ignored my counter question that the verdict, which he co-wrote, clearly records the absence of proof that the mosque was built by demolishing or desecrating a temple. In fact, it's worth mentioning the precise quote from the verdict. While the ASI report has found the existence of ruins of a pre-existing structure, the report does not provide the reason for the destruction of the pre-existing structure, and whether the earlier structure was demolished for the purpose of the construction of the mosque. No evidence is available to explain what transpired in the course of the intervening period of nearly 4 centuries between the date of the underlying structure and the construction of the mosque. Revealing moment number 2 came as I pushed him on why the Supreme Court bench headed by him allowed an investigation into the Gyanvapi mosque in Benaras, despite the law banning any change in the character of religious structures. Here again, Justice Chandrachud chose to justify his decision by straying away from the legal record, by taking the incorrect and partisan view that it is undisputed that prayers have always taken place inside the mosque's basement. You have now 17 suits filed all over the country. Sambal has erupted in violence. So that's the first sort of concern, that just by simply saying you can investigate the character, the floodgates have been opened.
Now, undoubtedly, through the ages, worship has taken place in the cellar, also of the Gyanvapi mosque.
Yes.
That is undisputed. The Muslim side has always permitted worship in the cellar of the mosque.
Yes, we had to take the unusual step of pausing the interview of a former Chief Justice of India, no less, to carry a fact check, to point out that the caretakers of the mosque have consistently disputed the claim of worship in the cellar, saying it's a false narrative. They've argued this in the public domain. They've argued this in the courts, including the Supreme Court, something Justice Chandrachud is bound to be aware of. And yet, he kept repeating it several times.
The fact that there is worship to Hindu idols in the cellar is also undisputed. So what would you like us to do? Selectively shut your eyes to the fact that there is Hindu worship which is going on in a part of the structure and only go by the structure of the mosque? Sorry.
As these words gain online traction, it has only intensified, or some might even say settled, the ongoing debate around the legacy of Justice Chandrachud, upholder of liberal constitutional values as he himself often professes, or as Pratap Bhanu Mehta put it in one of his columns, a Chief Justice of India tailor-made for the age of Modi.
Journalism at Newslaundry is powered by the public, because when the public pays, the public is served. Visit newslaundry.com/subscription and pick a payment plan of your choice. Pay to keep news free and independent. Your future, and indeed the future of democracy, depends on it.